This video is going to cover how to install a BCHN full node, which is the reference implementation for full nodes on Bitcoin Cash. This is the same full node that most of the miners on the network run. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to install it on a Ubuntu Linux operating system using a Docker container. So the source code that you're going to need is on GitHub under the Permissionless Software Foundation in a repository called docker-bchn. You can find a link to this from cachestack.info. This full node is part of the cache stack. It's used in several websites like fullstack.cache and the cache box. If you go to backend, you can go to the full node, and there will be links and videos here. This video will be placed there. But to get started with, you're going to want uh, to clone this Git repository. So right here, I have a computer running Ubuntu Linux, and I'm going to start installing it by following the installation instructions in the README. So I have a non-root user with sudo privileges running on an Ubuntu 64-bit machine. I've got Docker installed on the system. And so I'm going to git clone this repository. Then I can enter it. Set up a little bit. I need to create two directories, config and blockchain data, in the same directory as the docker-bchn folder. So the config folder is going to hold the config files, and the docker-b or the blockchain-data folder is going to hold the database. This is very handy because you can shut down the container and move this database from one computer to another. And so typically I run the cache box, which you can see at woodcachebox.com, and it is a Raspberry Pi, but a Raspberry Pi 5 takes quite a while to sync. So I will typically sync a full node on a bigger desktop. And then once it's fully synced, I'll shut it down and copy that blockchain data folder over to the lower powered Raspberry Pi. And then I can start it back up and it picks up where the other computer left off. That's kind of a little trick for syncing. But so we're on a Ubuntu operating system. Let's finish setting this up. We need to copy the run script and the bitcoin.conf file. So if I go into the Docker folder in mainnet, I can copy this run script into that config file, and I can copy this bitcoin.conf file into that config file. So if I go back in there now, the config, I can see that those files are there. That's what I need. And then finally, I can build the Docker container. So again, go back into mainnet and Docker compose build. Uh, you don't. Okay, I was on an older copy. So you can go Docker compose build, and I omitted the dash dash no cache because just for the demonstration, you can use it with or without. Doesn't really matter that much. The no cache flag just says, ignore any previous versions you may have and build from scratch. I already had a copy, so that's why the build command completed so fast. This will typically take like 10 minutes to build the full node software from the binary. But once the container is built, you can bring it on up. And then the dash D flag says, run in the background. So I still have control of my terminal, but then we can monitor the container with the logs command. And so what you'll see when it starts up is the very first line will say the version, and that's important because Bitcoin Cash has a fork or a network upgrade or a hard fork every year. And so every year you have to update your software. Otherwise, your node will fall off the network. And so the version is something you're going to want to look at least once a year. And right now, this is a brand new node, so it's just starting to bootstrap to the network. It's reaching out to other items. It's synchronizing the headers, and when it's done synchronizing the headers, it'll start downloading the blocks. And this will take anywhere from like a day to 2 weeks, depending on how fast your device is and how fast your internet connection is. And all the data is going to go into this blockchain data folder. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and shut that down with Docker Compose down. So this is a brand new installation. So once you've given it some time to sync, then you can start to interact and use the full node. So over here is my cache box. And I've got the whole cache stack running on my wood cache box. And if I enter uh, the container with this command, docker exec IT for interactive BCHN full node. Yeah, docker logs. Okay, there we go. I must have had a typo. Docker exec IT BCHN main bash. So that drops me into a shell script. And now I can interact with the Bitcoin full node using the command line interface. So, and you always have to reference the Bitcoin conf file when you give it a command. So if I give it that, I can just sort of check, that's a command to just sort of check the health of the network. So that's an example of using the command line interface to interact with it. And then there's also the JSON RPC, which is how other software in the cache stack will interact with the full node. So I can copy and paste this. This is using curl, so it's simulating an API call that, say, your JavaScript library might make. So that's the same call, just using the JSON RPC. So these are the two. The JSON RPC is what software would use to interact with the full node. The command line interface is what you would use as a user to manually interact with the full node. So there you go. You're off and running. This is how you set up the full node. This is like the core foundational piece of software upon which everything else is built. So this is the most fundamental piece of software that infrastructure that you'll need to run.